What's up, everybody? This is Karak with ACG, and as always, it's my continuing mission to bring you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. Remember back in the days when adding someone's name to a game meant something? Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell, Richard Garrett's Tabula Rasa, American McGee's Bad Day LA. Actually, scratch those last two. But here, we are long past those glory days of Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell and Rainbow Six Vegas. But that doesn't actually mean that it's stopped, because today we're looking at Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands. Now, Wildlands is an open-world shooter. It's developed by Ubisoft and is out March 7th for the PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. Let's see if Wildlands returns to the excellence of those bygone days, or if it's just one more reason why Tom Clancy's probably turning over in his gold-laced, diamond-encrusted, secret location-based grave. As always, if you like the video, maybe subscribe. So here's my review for Ghost Recon Wildlands. Forrest Gump AI, unlimited supplies, and not wanting to be the bad guys. Graphics are up first. So listen, for the most part, Wildlands is actually pretty as hell, from some rather insane draw distances to incredibly detailed landscapes that allow for, at times, a somewhat organic feeling to this game world. Because really, whether you're leaping out of a burning helicopter that just played a catcher's mitt to some enemy's SAM site fastball, or taking down incoming trespassers who ignored the beware of owner sign on your most recent forward base, the game handles effects, fire, explosions, debris, and even dynamic weather really well, giving a nice, moving feeling to the presentation of this rough approximation of Bolivia that the governments of the world let go to shit until they basically had no choice but to send someone in. And that someone is us, leading a team of ghosts and outfitted with an assortment of present-day weapons that can inflict fiery death on enemies. And while most of those you are fighting against are direct from 3D printers of game design known as copy-paste, overall, many of the characters' animations and design on both sides are pretty well done. Now, the issue is, the game has some problems, but they're all seemingly related to its one strength, a massive world and draw distance. First, on the PC, wrestling this thing to 60 frames per second requires some odd adjustments at 1440p, even with an i7 at 4.2 and a 1080, and even then, it leaves more of an undercooked feeling to it rather than a feeling that this is just future-proofing for NVIDIA and AMD's next attempt at pretending they're doing us a service by requiring new cards to play our old games. While the consoles target 30 FPS and use resolutions of 900p, 1080p, and 1440p for the Xbox, PS4, and PS4 Pro respectively, only the Pro really delivers that smoothly, with the most drops happening on the Xbox and then on the PS4. But neither really offers anything remotely close to the Pro, which is locked at 30 the entire time. And really, when you think about it, the Anvil Next engine that Ubisoft is employing here can indeed draw out some incredibly detailed vistas on all the machines it runs on. But odd concessions really abound, like a vegetation system that draws in sporadically around you, regardless of settings, making it feel like you're in a goddamn time-lapse Nature Channel video showing off someone's backyard garden. Or water, which, while occasionally looking okay, usually actually has the appearance of a strange clear jello and appears to update at around half the speed the rest of the game does. Now, that being said, while the game does have a number of low-detail textures, when taken into context in a world this massive and this open to exploration, it actually does incredibly well with its overall texture budget, and that was actually sort of impressive. Now, in the end, the game is attempting to do some pretty insane things, especially with that draw distance. And it's only matched by a couple other games out there, and there's simply no disputing that at times, with its dynamic weather pounding down a raid hard enough to make you start looking for cats and dogs, it really hits the marks. However, at other times, it makes you wonder about some of its questionable performances. I would say as a package, yes, it's trying to do something different, and in many ways it nails it, but you certainly do see some of the issues that develop because of that. Sound, music, and voice.
Weapon. That's a kill.
Engaging. The lieutenant's escaping.
Open fire.
Contact, here's the stack of tires. I just hitched rides from Barranco, Peru. How about you?
I got on board a bus in Wiiu, Argentina, and drank all the way to Villazón. Nobody wants to deal with a drunk on the bus.
That explains why you smell like ass.
And of course, sound is up first, and it's pretty hit and miss. The low-end thermal grenades taking out the soft, chewy insides of a squad of enemies all bent on sending you into in-the-field retirement, and the positioning and effects are all actually handled really well in those moments. For instance, when a helicopter comes into a battle at full speed, its rotor thump echoes off stone walls and can actually really confuse you as to where it's coming from, while directional positioning and separation are actually pretty much exactly as they should be at those times. Even with the game's sometimes questionable AI, this can be a godsend as two enemy forces are trying to make a special forces sandwich of you, and you need to know where they're coming from. Sadly, not all is well here. The game's gunfire, while showing differences across caliber and various attachments, still always sound gamey, eliciting a very distinct shooter-like sound, including that thap 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 sound of you hitting enemies 200 feet away like they're made of burlap sacks filled with firecrackers. I get that it's there to inform the gamer of a hit, but the enemy's exploding face should have already done that. Honestly, for a game like this, I would have expected a far clearer audio presentation, especially on different guns and where they're layered. Really, when taken as a total audio package, explosions and the audio effects themselves and the positioning are done really well, but when it comes down to the guns themselves, some of them lack some punch. Music. So really, due to the game's very nature, there's not a lot of large movie track moments in Wildlands, and the score seems content to sort of layer underneath the visual experience for the most part, only cropping up in specific instances. But when it does, I was actually a bit surprised by how well the elements sort of fit together, from native guitars strumming away lighthearted ambient bits to more somber moments when you've just pushed a bit too hard into enemy territory and layers of lead so thick you can walk on it basically turned your body into the world's biggest strainer. It's pretty good stuff, but it's never really too epic and it's never really too in your face. Just a nice overall audio blanket. And of course, that brings us to voice. And this was all over the place. I have no problem with the military lingo, and in fact, much of it fits, including the oddly juvenile jokes that one of the team members says the entire time you're traversing this landscape that's basically pockmarked with black scorches where you've been ending entire family trees. It's the fact that not a single character in this game is distinctive that bothers me so much. I mean, for Christ's sakes, I don't even hate the bad guy. He was just there. And your team has almost no character whatsoever, and it took me many hours into the game before I could even remember their names and which voice belonged to who. They trudge around the Badlands of Bolivia, occasionally spouting off nonsense or sometimes telling a dirty joke. But other than that, they're emotionless stiffs that do nothing to build a feeling of four people basically dropped into hell on earth to stop the bad guys from getting worse. It just doesn't do anything for me, though admittedly I have to say one part I really did like. The radio DJs in various ads had me cracking up from time to time, and the sobering moment that you realize someone on the radio is imploring folks to turn in friends and family if they do something wrong was really well done. But overall, not very impressive. And of course that brings us to gameplay and a bit about the story. So a Mexican drug cartel, led by apparently the world's most serious lucha libre wrestler, decides to take over Bolivia. No lie, the dude basically said, screw the mask, tattoo the damn design right on my noggin. Now this has continued for a while, but after the torture and murder of a DEA agent in Bolivia, the US decides to act, by basically sending in 4 dudes with scars, some guns, and no one else. Now narrative dissonance aside, it's your job to take out the drug cartels by stealing, shooting, stabbing, burning, breaking, and bombing the drug cartel's operations until they fall apart one leader at a time, which you can then track on your main screen. Which means one second you could be entering into an enemy encampment to steal a medicine-filled helicopter, and the next turning on radio transmitters to pipe out the voice of the resistance to anyone that can hear it. And I have to say that terrassing through a Bolivian backstreet at danger plus 10 speeds with my team firing assault rifles at my pursuers was actually incredible fun, and I think that's a testament to the open world nature of Wildlands that shows some of the possibilities that are available here. But despite such a large world and some excellent gunplay mechanics at times, the game doesn't take very long before that same open world nature exposes some pretty huge issues. Now I gotta get this straight though. First, the open-ended nature of the game is actually awesome because you can jump into a plane right at the starting, fly to the opposite end of the map and start your activities, or basically terrace across it in a truck or run to that side. But sadly, that also means actions and activities are not unlocked as you continue, or in any way connected to stories or cutscenes or playtime. So after the beginning tutorials, pretty much what you start out being able to do, and a few rare other things, is pretty much it for the entire game. Those are all the activities, and none of those activities change or are modified or in any way dynamic. That means when you steal a plane for the resistance in one state, you'll do the same in another, and another, and another, and another, and another. The game doesn't make any attempts to even adjust them for novelty. I mean, you see that helicopter filled with penicillin for the Bolivian prostitutes? Well, prepare to save their asses again and again and again, because no one thinks of rubbers and they just shoot up and go out again. Even before the third hour was pretty much over, the repetitive nature of the game absolutely creeps into almost everything you do, and that's not helped by a heaping of really awkward, forced gameplay bits that you start to notice almost right away. For example, say you decide to help pipe out the Resistance's radio broadcast. Now that means you have to guard the small radio broadcaster for a couple minutes from dudes that spawn right from buildings 20 feet away. I mean it. This is a building surrounded by a mile of grass on all sides that you just cleared, and it had nothing but a monkey wrench, 2 wet socks, and some bathroom graffiti in it, and it's popping out enemies like a goddamn queen alien. Or see that hill over there, that hill that is right on the other side of a completely sheer cliff. Watch and wonder as dudes just sprout up from the earth like a goddamned evil Johnny Appleseed who could read the future, came traipsing over and planted bad guy seeds before you actually got there. Sadly, where other games don't allow for such long draw distances and certainly don't have every place explorable like you do here, that also means this game is going to require greater care from the developers to control the dissonance that can occur if you can see these things happen. Of course, not to mention the hilarious times when this happens with vehicles that spawn at the end of roads and sometimes just, boom, run over you despite the car apparently appearing from an alternate dimension. Now, as you're taking down conveniently placed bad guys and leading the revolution, you're also finding resources all over the map that can be marked for collection from others. Now, as you mark items, you get resource points to unlock skills, which means making you able to run for longer is somehow tied into you collecting some oil drums and a box of Hungry Man TV dinners. Here's the big issue though. In many games, we have these kinds of situations, but previous titles attempted to hide this kind of stuff within a narrative and a gameplay-based blanket to sort of allow for that suspension of disbelief. But here, we sort of have the expulsion of disbelief. From start to finish, there's something really odd about Wildlands. It plays like Division without the complex locations. It plays like Assassin's Creed without the characterization. It paints a world filled with icon-heavy trappings that rarely do anything other than alert you to another dirt hovel you're going to go into and firebomb your way through with an utter lack of emotion or memory. And lastly, you guys know I test AI on all difficulties, from the lowest for folks taking their first steps into open world kill boxes to the highest for those of us who like our windage Kentucky. And let me tell you, high or low, this ain't pretty. Sure, sometimes these dudes will go full out, leaping and running between cover and laying down a withering case of suppressive fire, but most of the time they're driving straight into oncoming fire, meandering around lost, running up and down trails like they have firefight ADD, or pulling grenades and throwing them into the side of buildings they are standing next to. Sadly, this goes for your own team as well, who has to be the first field unit the US government has sent out with a combined IQ lower than the number of people in the fucking unit. They get hung up on everything, and if it weren't for the game's Star Trek teleporting device that really teleports them to wherever you are, I bet I would still have one team member stuck between these two trees that were like 10 feet apart, but apparently for him it was a goddamn Minotaur maze. They also have some really odd AI issues. For example, they'll let you basically fight for ages after they themselves started the whole goddamn fight, and then decide to hold fire for reasons that are not at all described. They can't drive, but they can shoot out the windows of a truck and hang out and lay down gunfire as you escape the no-win situation they just friggin' placed you in, though. Now, it may all sound bad, but it's not, because one of the game's saving graces is co-op. Throwing 4 of your friends in there is much more fun than playing with just the AI, even of course if you're still facing against an enemy that makes Forrest Gump look like Stephen Hawking. Even if the AI really isn't amazing, I absolutely loved lining up fire, upgrading my guys so they could sink shot a handful of enemies and popping off that first round, and then you see the others take dirt naps in split-second succession. That's awesome. Even really working my way into the deeper parts of the weapon and its modification list, both unlocked by finding boxes scattered throughout the world like a trail of goddamn raisinets, was still enjoyable despite that odd rigmarole. And even some of the later skills like Predator Thermal Vision and outfitting your drone with a number of power-ups can actually really be enjoyable to use. Sort of like replacing your car tires with candy canes. It's a sweet ride, but in the end, it's sort of friggin' pointless, and much of this game felt that way. Now, while many have complained about some of these situations in past games, those were always usually covered with attempts, albeit thin, to cover some of the repetition and map mess that we actually see in Wildlands. For example, Division and its various holo stories and unique base locations. And that is okay, as that's pretty much game development, creating a world and both making it look real and fun by making it also seem real and fun. There's a lot of deception there, and that's fine. But unfortunately here, we see the biggest difference, and that's this game lacks really charm and characterization. Even if you didn't love Black Flag, you might have dug the protagonist. Hell, even if you couldn't speak Wenja, you may have enjoyed the crazy cave doctor and Primal. In many ways, Wildlands is a testament to how much those things actually matter in video games, and it's sort of an important lesson. And that brings us to fun factor, and yeah, despite all this, it is actually very fun at times. With other players, you can absolutely have a great overall enjoyable game session. And the fact is, this game is well over 30 hours of content without getting anywhere near close to 100%. But the real question is, how long will that last before it suddenly dawns on everyone involved that even the main missions in Wildlands feels pretty much like random quests in an RPG? And it really, really does. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating scale. This is actually a wait for a deep, deep sale or rent. The game has a solid co-op system and a massive world and good gunplay at times, and it's actually a huge game. But in the end, it's also decidedly bland. And I think much of that is the AI and the mission structure. Now, picking this up from Redbox, Bluebox, or Gamefly as a rental, or maybe at $10, is more digestible as a solution than paying full price right now. It's no Umbrella Corps, but whatever it is, it's not really what I'd hoped for at all. Now, I'll be continually playing this and watching to see what updates come, because we've seen what Ubisoft has done with the Crew and the Division after some fairly painful releases. Let's hope the same goes for Wildlands. So as always, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you dislike the video, give it a thumbs down. Maybe check out Twitter, Reddit, or Patreon. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.